Welcome to Cognitive Dose. We are here, as always, curing blind spots, cultivating intellect, and shattering cognitive bias. Welcome to the debate. Today we are unpacking a very popular framework from Annie Duke's book, Thinking in Bets.
Right. Making smarter decisions when you don't have all the facts.
Exactly. And the core premise is pretty straightforward once you get into it. Life is not a game of chess. In chess, you see all the pieces, right? There is no hidden information. But life is, well, it's a lot more like poker.
You have fog, you have hidden variables, and obviously you have random chance.
Yes, exactly. And because of that fog and that luck, we suffer from this massive cognitive trap that the book calls resulting. Basically, we judge the quality of our decisions entirely by the quality of the outcomes.
Which is incredibly common, but a terrible way to evaluate anything.
It really is. The classic example the book uses is Pete Carroll's play call at the end of Super Bowl 49. He called a pass at the 1-yard line. It got intercepted, and the media they crucified him. They called it the worst play in history.
Even though, mathematically speaking, it was actually a completely sound decision.
Right. An interception in that specific scenario happens like maybe 2% of the time historically. Plus, a pass stopped the clock, which preserved their options. He made a high-quality decision that just suffered a tragically unlucky result. But our brains hate the ambiguity. We want life to be a clean math test. If you failed, you must have been stupid.
Yeah, it gives people a false sense of control.
Exactly. Which is why the book proposes explicitly redefining our everyday choices as bets. You detach your ego from the outcome. You stop seeing yourself as 100% right or 100% wrong.
Okay, so you're laying out the baseline theory here. We shift to a probabilistic mindset.
Yes, you internalize this wanna-bet lens. Because usually we hear something, we automatically believe it, and we almost never vet it. It just takes too much metabolic energy. But if you ask yourself, would I bet actual money on this belief? It forces the deliberative mind to wake up. It triggers your loss aversion.
And then you are supposedly meant to build these truth-seeking pods with your peers, right? To keep you accountable.
You use kudos norms, specifically accountability and diversity, to help mechanically separate luck from skill. Like how the poker player Phil Ivey, right after winning a massive tournament for $500,000, sat down at dinner and rigorously analyzed his strategic mistakes instead of just celebrating.
He wanted someone to tear apart his winning strategy.
Right. It's about building a cognitive immune system. You also use things like Ulysses contracts, pre-commitments to stop you from going on emotional tilt when things go bad. It's a very practical, rationalist approach to everyday decision-making.
Okay, let me stop you right there. I have let you lay out the tonic, the objective summary of the book, but now we really need to talk about the absolute toxicity of this entire framework.
Wait, toxicity? It's just a framework for navigating uncertainty.
It is dressed up as rationalism, but it is fundamentally structurally flawed. And honestly, we have to start with the absolute staggering hypocrisy of taking truth-seeking and accountability advice from Annie Duke.
Well, hold on. We are here to evaluate the ideas in the text, not to...
You cannot separate the framework from the architect, especially when the framework relies on a transactional zero-sum worldview. We are talking about someone who is a central figure in the UltimateBet God mode cheating scandal.
Yes, that was a massive controversy in the poker world, but...
Controversy is a very polite word for it. Insiders could literally see other players' hole cards. They stole millions of dollars. She profited immensely in an environment where the luck she lectures us about was systematically eliminated for the insiders. And let's not forget the epic Poker League bankruptcy.
Which was a business failure, sure.
A business failure where they guaranteed a $1 million prize pool, went bankrupt, and transferred ruinous financial risk onto vulnerable people and charities. And then she pivots to writing books on accountability? You want me to learn risk management from someone who wiped out other people's money without facing the downside variance herself? It is morally indefensible.
Look, you can heavily critique her past business dealings. That is totally fair. But the cognitive science in the book, the behavioral economics, is drawn from established academic work.
Is it, though? Because that brings me to my second point. The book completely dismantles its own scientific rigor by misinterpreting the very academic work it cites, specifically the work of Philip Tetlock and Jennifer Lerner.
How so? Tetlock's work on super forecasters aligns perfectly with updating probabilities.
Super forecasters, yes. But Duke uses this academic veneer to push these pseudo-scientific accountability groups. She claims that if you just get a pot of peers together, you'll naturally uncover the truth. But Lerner's actual research on post-decisional accountability shows the exact opposite. It structurally triggers something called defensive bolstering.
Defensive bolstering? As in you just double down on your original bet?
Exactly. When people know they have to justify a decision to a group after the fact, they don't magically become more objective. Unless they don't know the views of the audience beforehand, which in a friend group or a corporate pod you absolutely do. So they just spend all their cognitive energy building a more fortified, biased defense of why they were right.
But a truth-seeking pod is supposed to have a different social contract. They actively agree to reward accuracy, not ego.
That is a complete corporate fantasy. Look, even highly trained scientists succumb to the dilution effect and confirmatory drift in peer review, and peer review is supposed to be the gold standard of truth-seeking pods. Putting a bunch of tech bros or middle managers in a conference room and telling them to think like poker players doesn't cure cognitive bias. It amplifies the irrational echo chamber.
I think you're being incredibly cynical about human adaptability here. Even if group dynamics have friction, what about the individual tools? Things like Ulysses contracts to prevent emotional tilt.
A Ulysses contract works for a wealthy shipping magnate, maybe, which leads me directly to the most glaring, fatal flaw of this entire philosophy. It is the ultimate manifestation of survivorship bias and weird privilege.
Weird privilege? As in Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic?
Yes, this entire worldview, treating your life, your career, your relationships as a constant series of calculated bets, only works for wealthy elites who can actually absorb massive downside variance.
I have to disagree there. A marginalized person needs to make probabilistically sound decisions just as much, if not more, than a wealthy hedge fund manager.
But the consequences of the variance are entirely different. Look, in poker, if you make a mathematically sound bet with a 70% win probability and you hit that 30% loss, what happens? You reach into your pocket, you buy back in, and you play the next hand. You absorb the variance.
Right, you adjust your bankroll and trust the long-term math.
But marginalized individuals do not have a limitless bankroll in life. If they make a probabilistically sound but failed bet, say, taking out a high-interest loan for a small business or moving across the country for a job that suddenly falls through, that is an acute learning opportunity where they get to sit around and analyze their resulting.
It is a severe setback, sure, but the decision quality in the moment was still mathematically the right choice.
It is irreversible socioeconomic ruin. You can't just brush off bankruptcy and eviction and say, well, my decision-making process was mathematically pure. The framework completely ignores systemic barriers. It ignores the fact that most people simply cannot afford the risk of a good bet failing.
But what is the alternative you are suggesting? To just make irrational, fear-based choices because the stakes are high? The framework is just trying to stop people from going on emotional tilt and making things worse.
The alternative is recognizing that life is not a casino where everyone starts with the same stack of chips. When you tell vulnerable people to view their lives as a series of calculated wagers, you are essentially blaming them for the systemic variance that destroys them. You are saying, oh, you just didn't calculate your expected value correctly?
I hear your critique on the privilege aspect, and it's a valid angle. But surely the core mechanism, just pausing in your daily life to ask, wanna bet, serves as a crucial cognitive interrupt. It forces that collision between the present and future self. It stops the animal brain from making a catastrophic impulsive error.
What we stop's absolutely nothing. The animal brain, when highly motivated by real-world survival stress, will easily bypass a mental swear jar. It's a fragile, pseudo-intellectual band-aid that shatters the second real panic sets in. The entire premise is intellectually bankrupt, socially exhausting, and morally hollow.
Well, we clearly have a very fundamental disagreement on the utility of this entire methodology.
There is zero utility in adopting the ethics and risk models of a disgraced casino operative. None.
And on that incredibly tense, uncompromising note, we are going to end it right there. Use this knowledge to build your mental immunity, subscribe to Cognitive Dose, and we will see you next time.